It is a bewildering fact that while we launch out to distant planets, as human beings, we have not yet begun to see one another as people who must be together. Human history is hundreds of thousands of years old, and still we look at one another with superficial eyes, as if we haven't learnt in all these millennia of interacting that we are all merely human, that beneath our skins are continents of similar desires, eruptive dreams, swirling universes of thought, prehistoric urges, lightning flashes, and an eternal bloom of flowers. It is bewildering because it seems that beneath the strife of our age, internecine warfare, tribal antagonisms, religious intolerance, racial violence, and the disharmony of the sexes, beneath all these lurks the most ordinary discovery that we are human and that life is holy. We have not yet discovered what it means to be human, and it seems that this ordinary discovery is the most epiphanic that can be made. For when we have learned what it is to be human, when we have loved it and suffered for it, we will know our estate. We will know what gulf separates us from the gods. We will know what it means to be free, and we will know that freedom is really the beginning of our mutual destinies. Hello, hi, and welcome to the Soulful Restoration Podcast with me, Lyric the Curator. Thank you so much for joining me for this installment, which I started off with an extract from an essay written by Ben Okri titled Amongst the Silent Stones. In this essay, Okri tackles the idea of freedom and the interconnectedness of humanity. He suggests that we, the people, have settled for a superficial state of being which has disabled us from being able to truly see one another. And as a result, we have not yet tapped into the reality of freedom. I generally have a lot of questions about life, living, and humanity. I want to know what makes us tick and what makes living count in the greater scope of life. I believe that if we are parts of a whole, then our understanding of the whole can in some way enable us to gain an understanding of the parts. You know what I mean? So I enjoy engaging with works like that of Ben Okri and people who are on a similar quest as me, because in some way I get to compare notes, gain a different perspective. It is the same with this particular essay. Every time I read it, I understood it differently. Not because the words were any different, but because I was different. And when I was preparing for this particular episode, I went back to this essay to get some inspiration. And it got me thinking, I wonder whether us not being able to see one another is because we can't or because we don't want to. I figured not wanting to is probably the easiest way out, right? Because you don't have to try and understand nobody. You simply infer a personality and plead ignorance. It enables you to keep distance. But then I considered another possibility, that maybe it's not that we don't see our fellow man, but rather that we can't make sense of what we're seeing. It's somewhat disfigured. I think oftentimes we don't realize just how tainting living can be. We play so many roles in our lives that we get caught up in trying to meet the criteria of all these roles that we lose the authenticity of ourselves in the process. We try so hard to fit in, we end up living in a state of make-believe just so we can get a taste of belonging, even if it's for a brief moment. We wear other people's preferences as our personalities because we think we are safer in the blend. Yet we are worn out by the weight of the barricades we fight to keep up as security. We betray ourselves daily and still wonder why we're unhappy and unfulfilled. The truth is, there is no contentment in playing second fiddle. You have to release yourself from the weight of what the world wants you to be, so you can master your ability to belong without performing. So that's why today I'm talking about overcoming circumstantial identity. Maya Angelou said, "You are only free when you realize you belong no place. You belong every place. No place at all. The price is high, the reward is great." So before we overcome circumstantial identity, we need to know what it is. So my first point is, what is circumstantial identity? I define circumstantial identity as a camouflage you put on at a certain point in your life as a survival tactic or defense mechanism and keep on for so long that you can't differentiate it from yourself. I'll say that again. Circumstantial identity is a camouflage you put on at a certain point in your life as a survival tactic or defense mechanism and keep on for so long that you can't differentiate it from yourself. So the camouflage becomes a part of who you are, to the extent that you even defend it, on some, it's just how I am, when you called out. Another telltale of circumstantial identity is hypersensitivity. You are hypersensitive in the area you're camouflaged in because it's fragile, right? For example, I don't think anyone is born short-tempered, but there are various reasons a person might become short-tempered, and you remain short-tempered by choice, and that becomes a camouflage. Perhaps you weren't always shy and cautious until that one incident where you were shut down in public, or perhaps you were brought up in an environment that believed kids are meant to be seen and not heard. And now as an adult, you can't express yourself because the child in you still fears being reprimanded. In which case, you're not shy, you're simply scared. The point I'm making here is that circumstantial identity does not always look like a volcano waiting to erupt. Sometimes it's timid. So there's a wide range of emotions and how it shows up, but they all weigh you out just the same. Now, granted, life has segments, and those segments require different versions of us, right? And these versions we term roles. Each role has its own uniform, but all that uniform is supposed to do is be protection and in terms of reference. You still have to bring yourself to the role. You have to bring yourself to the job. But circumstantial identity will have you protecting the uniform because it gives you identity. Because without the title, without the friends, without the followers, without the cars, without the anger, without the shyness, you somehow cease to exist. There are numerous defining moments in a lifetime, moments where your fight or flight response is triggered. And if you've been in fight mode for a very long time, you will have a natural posture to be on guard all the time. You're the person that keeps everyone at arm's length, and heaven help anyone who dares looks at you funny because you're always ready for a fight. But you need to realize that that in itself is a reaction to trauma. And you need to work through that trauma as a place of origin until you become a person who can fight. And in this context, there's definitely a difference between a fighter and someone who can fight. A fighter is someone who shows up everywhere fighting. It doesn't matter who says what, you're at war. Whereas when you're a person who can fight, all that means is you are battle ready, but you only employ the skill when necessary. So hear me. When you exit a season in your life or a circumstance or a situation, you don't have to discard the skills you've acquired during that season. Your responsibility is to heal from the wounds of the season so they don't infect the person you're becoming. Which brings me to my second point. Why is it important that we overcome circumstantial identity? Well, the short answer really is because you deserve to be free and fulfilled. You deserve to walk in the confidence that comes with being comfortable in your own skin. You deserve to live in the beauty and power of your authentic self. And if we are to be 100, living at less than your best weighs heavy on your soul. Being everything to everyone and nothing to yourself is lonely. And when you play make-believe, you suppress yourself, your authentic self at least. And if you do it long enough, you will lose your sense of self. Your thinking will diminish to the point where you don't even have opinions of your own. You won't know what you like, what you don't like, because everything you are is based on what you think you should be just to make quota. Have you ever faked smiled before? If you've ever faked smiled, you will know the burning sensation that your cheeks experience. Like Your jaw hurts. Your cheeks are like on fire. Imagine your heart and soul withstanding that burning sensation continuously with no end in sight. They can't. That's why they die. Many of us walk around standing on the outside, dead on the inside, and no one can tell because the people we have around us bought into the facade we sold, not into who we are, so they can't see our private despair. There are so many ways to die, and not all of them have to do with extinction. A lot of them have to do with living many lies, living without asking any questions, living in the cave of your own prejudices, living the life imposed on you, living the script someone else wrote for you. We don't pay nearly enough attention to the deaths we experience within us while we're living, and yet they destroy us the most. They are the holes in our souls through which our life leaks out. And some of those holes are self-inflicted, and others are life-inflicted. But you have the responsibility to tend to those holes. You need to return to your true north. You need to declutter. Declutter your thoughts, declutter your perceptions, declutter your expectations, your friends, your media consumption. Just declutter so you can uncover who you are beneath all these masks. It is through the process of self-discovery, or rather self-rediscovery, that you gain self-confidence, that you gain self-love, that you gain self-discipline. So I'm the type of person, right, who knows a little bit about almost everything. And I'm also a generous problem solver, which is a dangerous combination if you're living with people. Some of my friends call me encyclopedia, which is a wild reality. But all that means is that if there's a problem, they're probably going to call Lyric, which is cool. Like, it's all good and well. I don't mind that. But I remember an incident, I was probably in high school, where a friend of mine asked me something. I still can't remember what it was. But I remember not knowing the answer. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know. Okay? And he looked at me with this look of surprise, like, how do you not know? And in my mind, I thought, but you don't know too. Why is it weird when I don't? But then I realized the expectation of me. And in that moment, I had a learning and a pivotal moment in my own life, which was I can't constantly fulfill everyone else's expectation, but I can't label myself a failure every time I don't either. Because if I do, then I am sowing a seed of people-pleasing and doubt in myself. I mean, it's not a reasonable expectation that I'll know everything. And it's not reasonable that they should expect it. But I create the boundary within myself to say, it's okay when I don't have the answer. I don't need to always have it. And that's fine. It has no bearing on my being. Same goes for saying no. I swear no is probably the easiest word in any language, and yet we all struggle to articulate it. Discipline isn't about enforcing what you can do. It's also about standing by what you can't or shouldn't do. Discipline is not just in the yes. It's in the no too. I'm not going to set myself on fire to keep you warm. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And you should be able to say that to anyone that expects you to. If that is the expectation, that I set myself alight so you can keep warm, then let's all be cold. Let's all sit out in the cold. Because you cannot constantly give off yourself to everyone and leave nothing for you. Now, some might ask, wait, is there room then for self-improvement without it being deemed circumstantial? The answer is yes, there is. But that stems from self-awareness and choice. Self-improvement requires that you recognize an area of development within yourself and choose to do something about it. It is conscious and intentional. It is realizing that even if you are caught between a rock and a hard place, you still choose and control your own behavior and your part in the story. It's choosing to respond as opposed to react, particularly reacting in impulse. Circumstance can be a breeding ground for self-improvement, where you find yourself in a situation that requires an elevated part of you. And so you work on that skill. So definitely self-improvement is a thing, and we all strive towards it. But self-improvement should be you improving your authentic self, not wearing on masks of what you think people should be. Now let's agree up front, right? There's no journey without challenges. And being prepared for challenges eliminates the days you might experience as a result of surprise. Which brings me to my final point for this discussion. Point number 3 is the challenges you may encounter on the journey to overcoming circumstantial identity. People will have opinions about the choice you've made to remove your camouflage. Lots will be said about you no longer compromising yourself to keep them happy. You may even be ridiculed for setting boundaries. And that's okay. It's all part of the process. If they were invested in you as a person, they'll come around eventually. But if they were invested in what they could get from you, and that's no longer on the table, then there's a possibility that there'll be no reconciliation. And that's something you have to make peace with. You may also experience a phase of confusion where you are out of sync with yourself. This is where you have removed the camouflage, but you're not quite comfortable in your own skin yet. You're still trying to make sense of yourself again. You're not where you were, but you're not where you should be, right? So you're somewhere dangling in between. And I want to encourage you not to try and avoid that discomfort. Embrace it, sit in it, and just go the distance. Go the distance in rediscovering yourself. You may also struggle with setting boundaries, right? Particularly if your camouflage is people-pleasing. And when you do set boundaries and enforce them, you might experience backlash. And in those moments, which will happen often, I want you to remember that you are betting on yourself for a change. And those who really care about you more than the benefits they could get from you will support your journey back to self. And the last challenge I want to touch on is doubt. You'll have moments where you doubt yourself. You will wonder whether this undertaking of unraveling yourself and upsetting others in the process is worth it. But before you turn back, before you grab that mask and put it back on, before you grab that camouflage and make it who you are once more, I want you to remember the weight of the pretense and the loneliness of playing second fiddle in your own life. And then ask yourself if you don't deserve better than that. As Maya rightfully pointed out, the price is high, the reward is great. And I want you to remember that. And if, you're unsure, like it happens, you're unsure about, okay, Lyric, I hear you, but how do I now identify? Like, what's the practical steps I can take, to start this journey or to finish it? Well, the first thing I would do is grab a piece of paper and a writing utensil and draw 2 columns on a piece of paper. In the first column, write down all the traits that best describe you, good and bad. Don't lie. There's no point. There's no point of you talking to yourself. So write down all the traits that best describe you. And in the second column, write down how or why you got those traits, right? Think about it could be an event, it could be just how you were. But I want you to pay close attention to the traits that are linked to a particular event. Excluding your birth, of course. I know that's like the event, but that's probably a self-improvement issue. I want you to look at the traits that are linked to a particular memory, an event, trying to keep safe, defense mechanism for yourself, survival tactic. Because those are the traits that are likely to be camouflages that you've put on over time. In closing, I want to say, I know the world requires a lot from us. I know life demands a lot from us. The only way to maintain your sanity is to have inner peace. And that starts with being true and faithful to yourself. Because you cannot uphold the humanities of others while betraying your own. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. That's all we have for today. If anything sparked your interest or spoke to you in this installment, share it on the socials. Let me know in the DMs. Drop me an email if you must. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, take care of yourself. Take care of those around you and that which surrounds you. Bye for now.